Alright, we're back and we're getting a little more crazier now. I'm tired as fuck, so let's just get this over with already. Me and my friend were throwing around ideas again until I had the brilliant plan to talk about video game sequels. So fuck you, Shiba, I'm the smart one today. So, video game sequels. Most games you play will result in a sequel of some sort, and typically sequels are supposed to be a lot better than the first game because it's meant to be an improvement on the original game. Story-wise, sequels can do a lot of things differently, like just being a direct continuation of an existing game, a brand new story altogether, a prequel which takes a dive into the past before the initial story, or in the case of something like Final Fantasy, be a completely new game with no connection with the prior games. It's not really rare for a game to get a sequel years after its first release, so a major graphical improvement is uncommon and is typically expected of it as well. It's also important to know sequels are limitless when it comes to what can happen in the gameplay, story, or even the development, because some games might not get a sequel for a long time because of development hell, and others might just get cancelled altogether. So I want to talk about the good, the bad, and the unfinished of video game sequels. It's important to know I won't be touching stories here either. Sequels can make or break it with the stories, but that's not the focus for today here. So don't go expecting me to explain why the hell Yakuza 3 has an entire chapter that just talks about the story for you. Fuck that segment, by the way. I've got a list ready for the games I want to talk about. I do not. And without further ado, let's talk about sequels in gaming. For once, I'm going to talk about something good at the beginning of my videos without being so goddamn negative, because this video is mainly going to be derived from personal opinion as always. Yakuza, or the Like a Dragon series as it's now being called here in the West, is absolutely my favorite game series ever, no question. I'm going to be calling it Yakuza for this video, so shut the fuck up. There's a lot, and I mean a lot, of things I can talk about, but I'll keep it simple for this video. Every time a game comes out in the series, it always strives to be better than the last one, and it's pretty great at doing so. The initial Yakuza game was pretty janky, to be blunt. It's visually poor and the combat left a lot to be desired, and while I want to see more, my experience playing Yakuza 1 was only the remake. You should watch that video. You can see the improvements in each game visually and mechanically. The games were always trying to keep improving. A big thing I want to focus on specifically is in Yakuza 6, where a brand new engine was made for the game called the Dragon Engine. And while it's very beautiful, it also was well, it needed a little more fine-tuning. In the next game made by RGG Studios, Judgment, using the same engine as before, they fine-tuned it and made it play so much better, and had immediately created the best fighting in the entire series with a lot of versatility, fast-paced combat, combos for enemies stuck in the air, and created brand new fighting styles meant for the new engine that can handle the boundless amount of new enemies it could add to the fights. I can glaze Yakuza all day and still have more to say, but this is about sequels and improving on what happened already, so we need to continue. We're not just done yet though with Yakuza. But before you start groaning, hear me out. When Yakuza 7 was announced, it was basically hitting a great big reset button on the Yakuza series as a whole. With a brand new main protagonist will follow, a complete overhaul of the combat system, switching to turn-based combat instead of the traditional beat-em-up style we've had since the very beginning, and the largest hub map we've had in the entire series. Initially, when Yakuza 7 was announced, I was really worried. I had adored the free combat and have never really been a fan of turn-based combat ever, but I held on to hope that maybe the game would be good, even if it was a lot more silly on the surface than the other games. Boom. Mind blown, and it blew my expectations out of the water, and I had loved it. It's really the most unique turn-based combat I've ever experienced, and I loved Ichiban as the new protagonist while the story respected where it began from, treating all the main characters from the previous entries with the respect that they had deserved. Now, I talked a lot about the massive shift in the series, which is a very common occurrence in video games, but Yakuza did it amazingly. And this year, Infinite Wealth, the sequel to Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon, came out, and how did it compare to the first game? Well, it was just better. It's pretty standard that a sequel should strive to be better than the first game in any way they can, but the way Infinite Wealth played and handled everything, from the new and improved combat, which allows you to move within a small circle to change the way you attack, just makes Yakuza 7 almost unplayable because these amazing changes are just so good. That's what sequels should constantly strive for. It needs to be better than the original, and it's even better if it advances so well that it makes the original almost inferior by making so many advancements. I'm sorry that I got carried away talking about Yakuza so much. You see, back when I was in high school, I had gotten introduced to the story and no, I'm not sorry for talking about the game so much. I love it so damn much. You can expect a Yakuza focused video sometime in the future. Let's get back on track for sequels. Uncharted is such a good series. In my last video I talked about how the remastered collection is great, but now we're actually gonna get into the games. So without any more delays, let's talk about why Uncharted 2 is way better than the first. So to start, graphically, Uncharted 1 for 2007 game, honestly, it ain't that bad. Nothing to complain about considering it's a remaster, and now while I did love the series from beginning to finish, it's also important to know Uncharted 1 is the worst game in the series. That's how you know a series is great though. If they never made that first step to make Uncharted, then you'd never get the other games, which drastically improves everything else in the games over and over. Uncharted 1 had fairly mediocre gunplay while keeping the same setting from beginning to end, which is typically just jungle, and the melee combat was just okay at best. It was something they never meant to rely on, which would change over time. Uncharted is known for its big spectacles and death-defying stunts that Nathan Drake does when he's caught up in a bad situation. But the original one has few of those, and as a matter of fact, the series from 2 onwards decided that if they increased the intensity and amount of anything, the games would just get better and better. And well, they did. 2 years later, 2009, Uncharted 2 comes out, and holy shit. Uncharted 1 can get in the fucking trash can because this game blows it out of the water. The set pieces are so much more frequent and intense, the climbing is improved so well, Nathan Drake could probably climb up a skyscraper if he had 2 toothpicks on him. The gunplay was massively improved, and the settings are diverse and visually pleasing. One minute you're in a war-torn city, the next you're in a village in fucking Alaska, now you're in a giant cave fighting some evil-ass Yeti, and then finishing up in a forgotten ancient city where the game finishes, and holy shit is it good. I love Uncharted, and the games remain this consistent with the quality, and honestly, just play it if you haven't already. What the hell are you doing? God of War 4 got a lot of attention reviving the series after God of War 3 ended with a cliffhanger, with everyone wondering if there would be a new game in the series and if Kratos had died or not. Well, we got God of War 4, so his ass is not dead. This is the first time in the series that the gameplay had a massive shift. The entire series prior to 4 was a hack and slash, focusing on taking on several enemies at once and getting big combos in with new weapons you'd unlock by killing bosses. God of War 4 is a lot more simpler in the combat with over-the-shoulder perspective and adding RPG elements into the gameplay. While I like both genres of gameplay, I'm not exactly fit enough to say which is better than the other. What I can say is that the new combat adds something refreshing to the series. Because much like Yakuza, God of War had been using the same formula for a very long time, and by implementing a new form of combat entirely, it helps refresh the series, especially since the tone is completely different than the original, with Kratos no longer being an anger-filled maniac hell-bent on revenge, and now just focusing on protecting and raising his son in an entirely new mythology. I think now we should start delving into bad sequels now. Story quality differs from player to player, and if I started talking about stories now, we'd never be done here. And it'd be worse, especially in the case of our next game on the list, Kingdom Hearts Rechain of Memories. Now, to anyone who only sees the surface of games or someone who just doesn't play them, most would assume Kingdom Hearts 2 is the sequel to Kingdom Hearts 1. But after the first game, Chain of Memories was made on the Game Boy, and no one can fucking play that. So we're gonna be going over Rechain of Memories, and this is what I'd call a bad sequel. The game isn't much different from the original, but the combat is very, unique. The combat system is now card-based, with bigger numbers being able to beat out smaller numbers, and you and the enemies can shut down any attack instantly if either one of you plays a higher number or a 0. This is the first major roadblock for fans of the series wanting to play the games, because after the first game, which was really fun, they're forced to play a card game that kind of sucks, to be honest. Now, if we disregard Chain of Memories and focus on Kingdom Hearts 2, it's a very good sequel. Kingdom Hearts 1 had an up-close and sluggish sort of combat, but Kingdom Hearts 2 zooms out and allows a lot more versatility in combat, introducing new forms to become, with each one being oriented to different things, like Valor Form being for pure combat, Wisdom Form for magic, Limit Form mainly being a way of using special attacks on your own, Master Form which allows for combos and aerial combat combining both magic and Keyblade combat, and Final Form which is just the secret OP form. All of this combined with being able to create and combine abilities to make combos combos that you enjoy, while giving you the option to fight all of the main bosses again, but harder, gives you a reason to play after the story's over. It's great, but Chain of Memories is that roadblock preventing you from reaching it, which also adds to why Chain of Memories is a pretty bad sequel. Dead Space is a horror game that needs no introduction. It's popular and unique, and by mentioning it in this point of the video, you already know what I'm going to talk about. Dead Space 3 is when EA tried to make the game more generic and appealing, quote unquote, to wider crowds of people, but by removing most of the horror and trying to get the attention of people like COD fans, they lost their original fans, losing the horror of the game and being a generic shooter with co-op gameplay. Not to mention, if you don't have a co-op partner when playing, you don't have access to some missions in the game, so it's completely cut off from you. The enemies aren't horrifying monsters of reanimated corpses anymore. You just got zombies now. Congrats. Dead Space 3, fuck you, and this is your only good scene. Dead Rising 4 is a classic example of taking your series in a direction where it's a hollow shell of what the game once was. The Dead Rising series is known for a lot of things, but mainly it's about killing tons of zombies, being on the time limit before being completely wiped out, and using anything as a weapon to take on the hordes of the undead, goofy or not. When you take the urgency of the game and create a crappy open world to your game and add a lot of nothing, you're left with a game with no charm, weak animation, and weirdly anticlimactic segments where you're unsure if the developers were trying on some scenes of the game.
Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines!
I'm far from being qualified when it comes to describing how some sequels can ruin characters from the previous game like here, but even I can say that Frank from Dead Rising 4 is far from being the guy he was in Dead Rising 1. They basically got rid of any depth to the man and gave him the Family Guy treatment of turning his basic personality traits to the extreme, and you get a miserable protagonist who you don't really care about. So boring game aside, you're better off trying any other game in the franchise if you want to have fun. At the beginning of the video, I talked about games that took years to get a sequel, and I think one of the biggest examples of that is Dead Island 2. Now for a change of pace, I'm not going to talk about the gameplay differences or anything like that, because I want to focus on why did it take so long to get a sequel. Dead Island was a pretty good success with the sales it reached, but people seem to have a general agreement that it was a fairly mediocre fetch quest game, with a lot of bugs, so besides being well monetarily, it wasn't considered good. The publishers for the game were Deep Silver, and the team who made the game were Techland, and after Dead Island and Dead Island Riptide came out, Techland was effectively removed by Deep Silver as developers because of creative differences, and then Techland made Dying Light, which was essentially supposed to be Dead Island 2, and Deep Silver realized they had fucked up really hard. So what really happened, to summarize company conflict, is that Deep Silver was salty that they missed out on the cash cow that was Dying Light, and when they couldn't just replicate it, they dropped Jaeger, hired Sumo Digital, and they backed out after realizing they couldn't give them what they wanted with what they had. And finally we got Dam Buster Studios, the people who actually made the game. So in the end, it only took about a little over 9 years to make the game after its teaser. For what it's worth, I think the game could have been way worse after it got released, because a game that escapes development hell is usually bound for failure. But if it did better than Dead Rising 4, who am I to judge? Now let's talk about our finale for this video. This part is about games that do not need a further sequel and games that should have. Now this is purely opinion, but my opinion is far more valuable than yours, so treat it as a fact. Uncharted should never get another game in the series. Uncharted 4 is the finale in the franchise, and it's an incredibly rare occurrence where a game can get a proper finale in today's gaming space, where sequels need to constantly be a thing and no franchise can rest. Uncharted 4 gave Nathan Drake the best ending you can give to a thief who was obsessed with the thrill of adventure and collection of ancient artifacts. Now it's time for my own opinion on a game that should get a sequel. Days Gone is never gonna get a sequel though, and that's stabbed me in my heart because I really like Days Gone. It was a bit of a buggy game, but the way things went, I couldn't help but fall in love with the game. I love Deacon St. John. Coolest name ever, by the way. He's a bit of a psycho in the game, talking to himself a lot and having a burning hatred for the zombies, but who can blame him? In the apocalypse with humanity dying away and killing every single day the infected who took it all from you, he's far more sane than others in the game for sure. So why won't this game get a sequel? Well, Days Gone had a long and expensive development history, and while the cost is still up in the air, it's estimated around $100 million, and the game has certainly made their money back. The reviews are another issue as well. The game is very mixed among reviewers. Some call it mediocre, others a masterpiece, and some say it's just bad. This is an issue because Sony had made Days Gone as a PlayStation exclusive, and when it doesn't reach the standards like other big name exclusives, there's little chance they want to take a gamble on a sequel for a mixed reception game.
Well, it looks like the people have spoken. Last of Us 2 is a terrible 3 out of 10 story. Meanwhile, Days Gone is an 8 out of 10 masterpiece of storytelling. Now, Polly, play the clip of Days Gone.
Oh, wait a second. Here, you can have this one back. But only if you promise to ride me as much as you ride your bike.
The story is the best ever.
Fuck you, donkey. Now, any hope for the series is left to the movie that was announced a while back, but unfortunately, it's been radio silent since the very beginning, so it's unlikely if the movie can come out, but on the off chance it does, depending on the success of the film, it'll either revive or kill the series entirely, but this is a matter only time will tell. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. I've covered plenty of games that learn from their mistakes and make the sequel amazing, games that kinda suck, games that stray too far from their origins, and games given poor treatment. With all that being said, tell me how you feel about it. Leave a like on the video if you liked it. Leave a comment telling me about your favorite game that never got a sequel, or one that I just didn't cover. Subscribe and make sure you keep coming back to watch me because I will know if you don't, and that's all. See ya.